How's that? Good deal. All right. Well, my name is Chuck Wade. I'm the State Director of Drugs Don't Work in Georgia, which is a program of the Governor's Office and an affiliate program of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. But before I took this job, I was a police officer for 15 years, and for 11 of those years I lived with drug users and drug dealers and drug addicts while I worked as an undercover narcotics agent. So for 11 years of my life, I spent a lot of time sitting and talking with those drug addicts on their roach-infested sofas, and there were many times that I'd watch them leave and go off to work so knee-walking drunk and so stoned out of their minds I don't know how they made it. Up until a few years ago, I looked much like they did. I had long hair all the way down to my waist. I wore 2 earrings in my ear. I still have the tattoos. And from that experience, I learned a few things about the drug problem in our country. The first thing I learned is just how serious the drug problem is. I think it's the most serious problem facing us as a nation. I'm convinced that drugs are a contagious, terminal plague on the United States of America, and I fear that if we don't do something to stop this drug problem, our country will end up like the Roman Empire. I'm sure you all remember reading about the Roman Empire in your history books back in high school, and I know that you'll remember that the Roman Empire was a world power. As a matter of fact, there was a saying back then that went, "All roads lead to Rome." That's just how powerful the Roman Empire was. And the people who lived in the Roman Empire suffered from the same thing that we as Americans suffer from. It's called ethnocentricity. It means that they, just like us, thought that they were the greatest race of people on the earth and that their country would be there forever. Where's the Roman Empire? It's gone. It stood almost 500 years and then it crumbled, and it was destroyed not by some foreign power that invaded. It was destroyed from within by the people that lived in that country. And as one of your frontline soldiers out there fighting that war on drugs for you for 11 years, I promise you, history is indeed repeating itself. The United States of America is a 230-year-old world power that will not survive to 500 years if we don't do something to stop this drug problem. That's just how bad it is, folks. The drug problem in this country is worse than it's ever been, and it's getting worse every day. If you doubt that, you tell me a time in America's history when we had 11-year-old children shooting each other in the face with 9mm handguns. Now, that's happening on a regular basis all across this country, and not just in the inner cities, not just in Chicago and Detroit and New York and Atlanta. Over in little bitty Smyrna, Georgia, where I worked my last year and a half in law enforcement as a crimes against persons detective, we had 4 shootings in that year and a half. 3 of those shootings were murders, and all 3 of those murders were committed by boys under the age of 16. In one case, this 15-year-old boy walked into a crowded apartment complex parking lot, pulled a .45 automatic out of his waistband, and opened up on a crowd of people that were milling around there. There were about 40 folks having a block party. He just began firing at random into the crowd. Shot one guy in the back. Bullet came out his chest and killed him. Shot a teenager in the elbow. It was a miracle more people weren't hurt or killed in that shooting. And all 3 of those murders committed by those babies in little bitty Smyrna, Georgia, were directly drug-related. As I said, the drug problem is worse than it's ever been. It's getting worse every day. We must do something to stop it. And Lord knows we've been trying. Since 1980, the United States of America has spent more than $290 billion of your federal tax money trying to stop drugs from coming into America. $290 billion with a B. That's more money than we spent on all biomedical research combined. Folks, we spent more money trying to stop drugs from coming into America than we spent on finding a cure for cancer, arthritis, and heart disease combined. Now let me ask you a question. What's been the result of this enormous expenditure of your federal tax dollars? Well, in the last 10 years, cocaine and heroin production over in source countries has doubled. Cocaine and heroin are cheaper today on the streets of America than they've ever been. So after throwing billions and billions and billions of your tax dollars at the supply side of America's drug problem, not only have we not stopped it, it's gotten twice as bad. And the truth is, friends, we're never going to be able to stop drugs from coming into this country. It's absolutely impossible. I'll tell you why. It only takes 10 tractor-trailer loads of cocaine, pure cocaine, to supply the United States with all the coke it needs for 1 year. So imagine trying to figure out which trucks are bringing in the coke at what point and stopping them. It's impossible. It cannot be done. It only takes 1 airplane, the size of a Boeing 747 airplane, loaded with heroin, pure heroin, to supply the United States with all the heroin it needs for 1 year. So imagine trying to figure out which large airplane or which smaller planes are flying in the heroin at what point and stopping them. That too is impossible. It only takes one 25 square mile tract of land to grow enough opium poppies or enough coca plants to produce enough heroin or enough cocaine to supply this country with all those drugs it needs for 1 year. So you see, it doesn't matter how many coca fields we destroy over in source countries like Colombia and Peru. It doesn't matter how many opium poppies we eradicate over in source countries in the Middle East like Afghanistan and other Middle Eastern countries. They've already warehoused up enough processed heroin and processed cocaine to supply this country with all those drugs it needs for the next 20 years. In Mexico, drug smugglers are flying cocaine across our borders in radio-controlled airplanes. Little model airplanes that are so small, not only are they invisible to radar, they're invisible to visual observation. Up in Canada, these enterprising drug smugglers have figured out a way to form cocaine into a plastic-like substance that they're molding, among other things, into these air cargo kennels that you use to carry your pets on board commercial airliners, and they're smuggling in coke in that way. Not long ago, this 57-year-old man and his 62-year-old wife Rachel were apprehended as they attempted to drive across the United States border from Mexico with $68 million worth of cocaine concealed in their motorhome. Now, when our grandma and grandpa can be drug smugglers, how are we ever going to stop drugs from coming into this country? We can't. It's absolutely impossible. A few years ago, my good friends at the Drug Enforcement Administration located this underground tunnel. It was a 5-foot by 5-foot concrete tunnel, 30 feet under the ground, that ran from the drug smuggler's home in Mexico underneath the United States border to his cocaine warehouse in Douglas, Arizona, some 293 feet. It was equipped with electronic sump pumps to keep it dry and a system of pulleys for moving cocaine and money back and forth underneath the earth. It cost him $1.5 million to build the tunnel. The way he got into the tunnel was by pushing a button in his home that raised this $18,000 pool table off the floor, revealing the entryway. When the DEA found the tunnel, they also found the bones of the workers he had hired to dig it, because when they completed it, he shot them execution style in the back of the head and buried them there so they couldn't reveal the location. Also, when the DEA found that tunnel, they said, "We cannot begin to estimate the number of these tunnels that run underneath our borders for the purpose of smuggling drugs." So you see, ladies and gentlemen, in order to stop drugs from coming into America, we would have to build an impenetrable dome, not only over the United States, but underneath the United States. And of course, that's impossible. We can't do anything like that. And we're not going to close off our borders. America has always been a friendly country. We're not going to seal off our borders just to keep drugs from coming in here. That's not going to happen. The point is, attacking the supply side of America's drug problem has not worked in the past. It is not working now. It will not work in the future. And I'm going to tell you a secret that the politicians sometimes forget to mention to you when they tell you they need your tax money to attack the supply side of America's drug problem. And once again, let me just stop and remind you that politicians lie. Sometimes those rascals will outright lie. Sometimes they'll lie by omission, by leaving things out. And what happens in this case is that they conveniently forget to tell us that even if we could stop all the drugs from coming into America, which is absolutely impossible now, but if a miracle occurred, and that's what it would take, a miracle, if the good Lord suddenly waved his hand and we were able to stop every grain of cocaine and heroin from coming into America tomorrow, and I said grain like a grain of sand, not gram. If we could stop every grain of cocaine and heroin from coming into America tomorrow, the very next day, drug dealers would be manufacturing synthetic cocaine and synthetic heroin in clandestine or hidden laboratories all across this country. They can do that now. The only reason they don't is that it's cheaper to import those drugs. I got to turn off all my electronic gadgets here. It's interfering. So the only reason that the drug dealers, don't manufacture the drugs synthetically right now is it's just cheaper right now for them to import the drugs. If we could stop all the coke and the heroin from coming in, which we cannot, if we could send our law enforcement officers rushing out that next day to shut down all those hidden labs that would pop up and begin manufacturing those drugs synthetically, which would be impossible, well, it still wouldn't affect our marijuana problem, would it? We home grow marijuana with a THC content of over 60%. THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, is the active ingredient in marijuana that makes you high. 10 years ago, the best we could produce domestically, the best we could grow here on U.S. soil, was 3% THC. It's up over 60% now. That's American ingenuity for you. So you see that marijuana joint that you may have smoked back in high school or college, that is not the same pot that our kids are smoking today. Today it is a much more serious, a much more potent, a much more dangerous, and yes indeed, a much more addictive drug. Marijuana is in fact an addictive drug. Medical science has proven that beyond a shadow of a doubt just these past few years. And if anyone happens to still doubt it, well, I'll be glad to debate it, head-to-head, nose-to-nose, toe-to-toe with any so-called drug expert in this country, and I guarantee you I'll win that debate. Marijuana is an addictive drug. And we grow marijuana up in the mountains of North Georgia. We grow it in greenhouses in our backyards. We grow it under grow lights in our basement.